Hi, folks. If you are feeling especially messy right now because it is tax season and this year, for some reason, the IRS has permitted certain income statements to be provided by end of February instead of end of January. And we know that end of January is already painful enough in terms of getting your taxes done by April 15th. And now you really only have from March 1st to April 15th to do them, which has got to make CPAs absolutely nuts. Um, then yes, I understand why there is chaos in your mind. Um, for those who are disabled, um, and who are especially new to that tax situation, there are some learnings that might be helpful. I looked this up for a full year, and even the better part of 2 years as I was starting to explore whether I could even pull the trigger on taking short-term disability at any point. That I needed to, and then whether I wanted to pull the trigger on taking long-term disability from my company. And those were very big decisions to have to make. And so there are a few things in particular that I think were really important that took me a long time to learn, or that I didn't learn until today when I did my taxes for the first time within that structure financially. That I just haven't been able to get answers to. And now that I have answers to them because I've done my taxes and I can see how absolutely insanely simple it is, I thought I should pass those along because, goddamn, if it's not hard to find this information, I just don't know. The first thing you want to know if you are considering or if you are already in the throes of having taken short or long, or especially long-term disability, um, is how your income is going to be structured from a tax perspective. So number one, short-term disability is just regular salaried and taxed just like you would if you were at work. Okay, so if you have 6 months of that, most companies are set up to give you 6 months of that. But obviously, I'm not your company HR and I'm not your tax advisor, so you need to read your own policy. But the common numbers are that you would have 6 months of that. And so that would be taxed the same way as if you were at work. So whatever your net income is coming out as when you're at work, it's the same thing it's going to come out as for your short-term disability if you're on that 100%. Occasionally, you'll have companies, especially if you're on a lower wage scale, where you should have been paid more in the first place, but you aren't getting paid more. You might be at like a 60% short-term disability. And so that obviously your income will vary at that point. Now, when we're moving into long-term disability, sorry, I don't know why the light just did that. When you're moving into a long-term disability space, what you want to keep in mind is it is not the same as short-term disability at all. And the big secret that nobody tells you, because then you would be much more likely to use your long-term disability benefit, is that when they say you'll only receive 60% of your income, you're not getting taxed on that. You're not getting federally taxed on that. There are some states that will tax you on it and some that will not, some localities that will tax you on it and some that will not. But if you are in a state where there's no localized, including state income tax, you are not getting taxed on that at all. And what that essentially means is that whereas 60% of your salary might make you really scared to think about because, oh my goodness, like that's 40% less than I had before. The reality is that even if you're in a non-taxed state, you are paying probably 28 to 38% tax anyway, in your federal return. And now you're going to be just seeing 2% more of that or 12% more of that gone. So you're essentially living on the same take home. You're just not paying federal tax on it. Why is that? It's because you really have legitimately already paid tax on it in the same way that if you bought a private disability plan, you would not be taxed on that out of pocket. You don't even receive a W-2 for that at the end of the year. The reason is because you've paid the premiums after your company took out all of its tax, and you're paying with your take-home pay, your net pay, you're paying those premiums out. And so you are considered to have, since you've already paid in and paid in, and then you're taking out of that pay in, essentially is how insurance works, which is essentially socialism and essentially communism, but we don't like to call it that, because then we wouldn't do it anymore. You've already paid the tax on that, okay? So it becomes what is called a non-tax event or non-taxed event, financially. So this has a few other pieces to it that I'll talk about later in another video, if you are needing to declare your income for foreign purposes and such. But for now, let's just get your head around the fact that that 60% is not AGI. It's not adjusted gross income. It's not beginning gross income. It's net income. Okay. It's what comes to you in your check, in your direct deposit. It's just 60% of what you used to gross at work. Take that in, enjoy it, celebrate it. It's a real thing. So if you are legitimately disabled, there is not a good reason for you to stay at work and keep killing your body further. I have friends who are still doing this. Don't do that to yourself. It never ends well. You do want to be able to function as you get older. And if the way to do that is that you need to stop working to take care of your body and work with your doctors full time, then you may need to do that. No, it's still doing that thing. I'll take it off. Okay, so that's the beginning of what you want to know. Now, if we move into the tax space, I did not know what I was going to be getting into for this first tax return year for just living on disability benefits. I've never done that before. I had no idea how it would go. I didn't know why they were sending me W-2s if I wasn't supposed to declare the income. That kind of freaked me out. And then, because your company probably is not a good communicator, my company certainly is not, they're going to likely send you 2 W-2s. What the hell? And nothing else, nothing to explain that, okay? I've even had an insurance lifetime insurance agent who is a friend of mine look at these 2 W-2s. I could not find the difference. She could not find the difference. They didn't say one was a correction. It wasn't anything like that. But the numbers under the income were different. And that was a problem because one was about double my monthly pay, but I only had I had like 1 month of short-term disability, not quite 1 month, at the beginning of last year before I rolled on to long-term disability. And then the rest of the year was long-term disability. And so I was like, why are they showing me basically 2 months worth of income? And oh my God, am I going to be taxed on that? Like, what the hell? This is a problem. And so I called them, and of course I sit on hold for an hour, and then the system hangs up on me, and I never reach a person and all of that, and did that several times. So I've written them a letter about it to get an answer about it. But I finally figured it out when trying to do the taxes this weekend. Obviously, I wouldn't have like finalized the taxes until I heard from them. But now that I've figured it out, I will be able to do that without waiting for Godot, waiting to hear from them. So the difference is and this is very likely to happen to you if you work for a large company. Certainly if you are in any kind of middle management, upward kind of thing. If you make a living wage and you work for a large organization, this is likely to happen to you. You're going to get 2 W-2s. One is going to be the amount that you actually got paid that year in like salary terms. And if you were on short-term disability for part of that year, that will be there. Okay, that's just like a regular salary. It may be coded as sick pay or third-party sick pay, but it may not be. And that's okay because short-term disability is not normally a post-tax event, meaning a non-taxable thing that you don't like have to pay taxes on to the IRS. Usually it is a taxable event. Okay, so the second one that you're going to get is going to have some different codes on it. And it's either going to be coded as retirement funds or what's the other one? There's a Social Security one, but it won't be that. The third one is like a third party sick pay, but it is coded code J, for example, which is the W-2 that you're going to get from probably the insurer, the long-term disability insurance company, is going to be code J. So that's going to be the big number, and you're going to think, holy shit, am I going to get taxed on that number? You're not. That code J means that this is a post-tax event, that this is non-taxable income, and it will say that for you. So you're going to be like, yay, that's what I needed to hear. Okay. But I'm sorry, I digressed though. The second W-2 from your company, from your employer, is going to be inclusive of if there's a pension that you're on, that you're still accruing, because in most cases, if you're on long-term disability, you are still under you're called an inactive employee, but you are, unless your policy states otherwise, your policy has probably dealt with what the pension situation is. If you are at a company with still a pension structure, and I know that's less and less likely these days, but if you are, it will say in the policy whether you're still accruing months toward that pension vesting. Okay. So what's going to show up as the income, which for me was the scary amount that was, it looked like 2 months of wages. And I was like, oh shit, but I didn't do 2 months of taxable wage income last year. So what is this? When you actually break it down and you look at it, it was like 4 different things with different codes. And as I entered those codes into the online systems that, help you with your taxes, it said what each thing was. And one of them was a pension thing. And one of them was this is what your employer contributed to your health care, because keep in mind, if you're on long-term disability, you're still going to be under your employer's health care. At least until you get approved for disability, which will then start the calendar for you to, at some point, become eligible for applying for Medicare. If you don't get approved for Medicare, you just stay on that insurance from your company. If you do get approved for Medicare, you may be removed from your company policy, but that's way further down the line, and that can take a very solid 2 years. You're probably going to wait for that. And that's after you get approved for Social Security disability, which in itself can easily take 2 years. So you could easily be talking 4 years down the line. You might have to think about the Medicare question. Okay, so in the meantime, you're going to just input those numbers, and it will become clear to you as you're doing, as you're going through your tax portal, why you're putting in all these numbers. Okay. And I find, I partly did it manually this time, input everything manually because I don't have good technology here. But I would kind of recommend you do it manually if you can, if you have the mobility to do that. I would do it manually your first year, because if you just take a picture of it or scan it in, it's just going to put everything in there and you're not going to see what all those codes mean. But if you have to click on, oh yeah, this is code E, and then code E says, oh, this is for your employer contribution to your healthcare or whatever, then you're going to think, oh, okay, so that's not salary. It's not a taxable income in the same way. Then you're okay. Okay. So I would recommend that if you can. I will also say that I've been using TurboTax for a while. I used it when it first came out and it was a fucking disaster. And then I stopped and I went to a CPA and I said, okay, here's all my stuff that I know to keep during the year, but I need you to train me on how to be a good client for you. And so if you tell me all the things that I need to be keeping in mind, I'm going to take notes in this consultation, and I'm going to come back to you next year with all my shit in the right way so that you can have an easy job. CPAs don't do that. They don't become CPAs because they're good teachers. Okay. They're not good at that. So I learned that, and I paid that person for that year, but never another year again. I started doing it online again a few years later on TurboTax. It's kind of a data heavy site to use. And so you want to make sure you have a good connection that day and so forth. But almost everything is automated now. So if you do have an active job, you'll be able to pull in that information and it will also know what you did last year and so forth. So there are some automated things that make it good. But I will say a year or two ago when I tried to do it, I think it was last year, it was a disaster because the whole system kept crashing and you just could not get in. And it was really, really a problem. And you only have a certain amount of time to do these things in, right? So have a backup, know how to do things on paper. You still need to know that. Um, but when so I went through TurboTax today and I did the whole thing. And then I saw, oh, wait, okay, this is legitimately a very small AGI number, the adjusted gross income number, which is good because I expected it to be. So what I did is I remembered that back when I had a lower income generally for a long time, I was eligible to use the free services through the IRS. And now there are multiple trusted partners that the IRS has. And you can go on the IRS website and say, just kind of ask that question. And they're right up there during tax season. It's not hard to find. The IRS site, so far anyway, and it may get gutted any minute now. But I mean, it is getting gutted right now. But so far, the site is still good. And you can click into the trusted partners. TurboTax used to be one, but is not right now. They charge for everything. And so even for mine, they were going to charge $200. And in the past, they have always, like, based on your income, they would tell you what rate you owed them. And if you were under a certain income, they would just, you would start it free. And then as you ask them for extra bells and whistles, they might say, okay, you have to pay us $50 now or whatever. Now they don't do that. They assumed that I owed them $200 just straight out of the gate, and they would not let me downgrade. And I was like, well, screw you then. And so I went on TaxAct, but there are 8 different trusted partners, and it's very clear whether you qualify for them. Some of them are as long as you are under 65 and make under $84,000 in your gross income. That's a whole lot of people. And some of them are under $48,000, which, as it happens, I still qualify for now, which is a big, big difference than the situation that I was in before. So in doing my taxes today, what I can tell you is they were easier to do today than I remember them being when I was like 20 and had nothing, had no assets, had no debt, was just, making $10 an hour somewhere and living on cash. So take heart if you are in your first year of disability and you're afraid to kind of sit down one Saturday with your taxes because it's time to do a new thing with them. Or if you are having medical issues and you don't know if you're disabled and you've never thought about yourself as disabled, and so you assume that you're not, and you assume that that's for other people, which is complete ableism bullshit, by the way. And it's not necessarily your fault that it's in your head, but it's still bullshit and it's breaking your body. So it's very easy to do your taxes once you are on disability. And if you are indigent, there's an additional deduction and an additional tax exemption. Most people don't qualify for it. I will not qualify for it. But if you are under 65 and you have what they call taxable disability income, which will be a certain echelon of Social Security disability, then you may qualify for that. So that is what I learned today. I hope that's helpful. That answers a lot of questions that I could not find the answers to. And even in disability support groups, almost no one talks about LTD, long-term disability group benefit, partly because they don't know it exists, and partly because people who do have it are not always very public about it. And partly just because internalized ableism is just a real thing. I will make a different video about how to handle these things if you are needing to file your taxes with a bearing in mind something abroad. So if you're going to be living abroad and how to kind of navigate that. But for now, hope that's helpful.